G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Now, this morning's 11 o'clock news had an item concerning fake Twitter accounts which Tony Abbott was taking action to have removed from his Twitter account. Apparently he had about 500,000 fake Twitter followers. And there's a lot of people who would never have heard of the idea of fake Twitter accounts, but because, you know, here I am living out in the hills with kangaroos for companions, I read the Glenniness Examiner. And here we see July 18th, 2013's newspaper, Twitter Followers Not Real People, by Mark Hawthorne, National Business Editor, Fairfax Metro Media. Okay, I'm going to read that to you and I'll let you have a little bit of a look at Jamie McIntyre of 21st Century Australia Party. Okay, Jamie McIntyre says he started his own political party to, quote, keep both Labor and Liberal parties honest. But sources close to the party suggest he may have a fake Twitter following, with less than 3% of his claimed 1 million Twitter followers actually being human. An analysis of McIntyre's private Twitter account suggests that the political aspirant who is running against Barnaby Joyce for the seat of New England at this year's federal election may have been purchasing followers for the past year. Twitter followers can be bought for as little as $3 per 1,000, but the numbers quickly drop off unless regular payments are made. The quote followers, unquote, tend to be fake accounts managed by individuals and the companies hoping to profit by selling popularity on the social media platform. Far from the claimed peak of 1 million followers, McIntyre's real following is more likely to be 22,400, according to data obtained by Fairfax Media. That means that less than 3%, means that less than 2.5%. Well, they say less than 3% of the 1 million he once boasted are actual people. When quizzed by Fairfax Media, Mr McIntyre denied any knowledge of purchasing followers on Twitter. Quote, I wouldn't even know how to buy Twitter followers, unquote, Mr McIntyre said. Quote, I'm not a social media guru. I don't know how to buy Twitter followers or get a social media following. Interesting thing for him to say that. Asked if he could confirm how much money either he, his political campaign or his social media team had spent on Twitter followers in the past year, Mr McIntyre replied, quote, I don't know that we have bought Twitter followers, so the answer is probably zero, unquote. According to metrics obtained from the website twittercounter.com, on April 21 this year, McIntyre had 631,619 followers on Twitter. That number fell to 458,487 on April 22, then 285,345 on April 23, and just 112,221 by April 24. McIntyre's following surged back above 440,000 on May the 13th, but tumbled again last month and stands at just 105,000 now. That was on 18th of July. That is, quote, that is not an organic rate of decline or growth, social media consultant Ben Harris-Roxas said. Quote, either huge legions of fake followers are being culled or someone is buying followers. But it's not a normal pattern of growth or retraction. The problem these days is that it's hard to find out who is real on Twitter and who isn't. You can buy 5,000 or even 10,000 followers for as little as $5. But without a really high profile and a long history, I can't see someone getting to 1 million, not through normal means, unquote. McIntyre's website, www.jamiemcintyre.com, boasts that, quote, currently he has 1 million followers on Twitter and a database of 550,000. According to metrics obtained by Twitter Audit, just 21% of McIntyre's remaining followers are real people. That compares with 55% for Kevin Rudd and 45% for Tony Abbott. So, 2.5% of his claimed followers are real, whereas 55% of Kevin Rudd's followers are real and 45% are real for Tony Abbott. Now, let's have a bit of a look at this 21st Century Australia Party and Jamie McIntyre and where it all come from. Well, although my DNA's been living around here since 1882 when my father's grandfather first brought it here to try and live, I'd never heard of this Jamie McIntyre until his face appeared in the local paper, which would have been April 4, 2013. And it says, former local boy says he will stand against Windsor. Former local Jamie McIntyre is considering running for the September 2013 election in the seat of New England against the incumbent MP Tony Windsor. Mr McIntyre has been critical of Mr Windsor's support of the current federal government in the hung parliament and previously offered $250,000 to fund a campaign against Mr Windsor's re-election. Launching a political party called 21st Century Australia Party, Mr McIntyre outlined a radical overhaul of Australia's political system, which included abolishing state governments, scrapping compulsory voting, allowing the public to vote directly on national issues, and for an independent board to decide on government spending rather than politicians. Mr McIntyre grew up near Glen Innes and still owns 6 farms, mostly in Pinkett. He owns beef farms and 1 sheep farm near Emmaville. His brothers manage the properties and his family all still live in the local area. Mr McIntyre said the 21st Century Australia political party would overhaul what he claims to be an outdated 19th century political system that needs to be modernised for the 21st century. He said his party is intending to field candidates in all 150 House of Representatives seats Australia-wide and also Senate seats in the upper house. The new 21st century political system is pushing for voters to vote directly on major policy with the advent of new technology now available from the US and for government spending to be put into the hands of an independent board and removed from the hands of, he says, incompetent politicians. So it's the Gauleiter system. Moreover, he's calling for elimination of both state governments and compulsory voting. His Facebook page on a new 21st century political system already has thousands of voters. Quote, Tony Windsor should do the honourable thing and resign, just as Prime Minister Gillard should for putting such a bad government in power, or Windsor should run as a Labor or Green candidate so that voters can see his true colours and not be deceived and betrayed again, Mr McIntyre said. Mr Cattle Baron, Mr Sheep Warrior. Putting his money where his mouth is, after Tony Windsor was elected in 2010, McIntyre offered $250,000 to fund a campaign to ensure Tony Windsor was not re-elected. I think Tony Windsor's behaviour was and is a disgrace to side with the ALP for the last 3 years. He should be banished from the area forever. Führer McIntyre said. McIntyre is financially well placed to run a concerted campaign against Windsor and should attract lots of young voters and farmers because of his family's long farming history in New England. A motivational speaker and self-made millionaire business tycoon, Mr McIntyre is bringing Arnold Schwarzenegger to Australia in June. He hosted Randy Zuckerberg, the former marketing and political executive of Facebook and sister of Mark Zuckerberg, at his annual 21st Century Financial Education Summit in Brisbane last year. Mr McIntyre has previously hosted speakers including Sir Richard Branson, Mark Burris of Wizard and Yellow Brick Road fame, and Eddie Maguire. Mr McIntyre is the founder of the 21st Century Education Group, consisting of over 12 companies with close to 100 staff and franchises that have a turnover of $40 million. He has almost 1 million followers on Twitter and a database following of over 550,000 people across Australia who have attended his large-scale seminars or read his best-selling books including, quote, What I Didn't Learn at School But Wish I Had, and, quote, 101 Ways to Improve Australia. Mr McIntyre has also acquired small media assets in recent years and owns what a press release claimed is one of Australia's fastest-growing online news sites, www.21stcenturynews.com.au, where he has written articles highly critical of the current government and current political system and which push for urgent change. Yeah, he's a self-promoter, isn't he? 23rd April. 21st Century Party's Jamie McIntyre headed McIntyre Comes Home. Glen Innes expat, self-confessed business tycoon and self-made millionaire Jamie McIntyre has put himself forward for the seat of New England to run against the likes of Tony Windsor and Barnaby Joyce. He will officially launch his campaign for the seat, the series of meetings at that area that started last night in Glen Innes. Mr McIntyre grew up on a farm and went to school in Glen Innes before going off to University to study accounting. After dropping out after the first year, and being disillusioned by the education system, he moved back home for a while. Is that called sulking? Before heading to Sydney, where he started a telecommunications company selling mobile phones. After going broke and being more than $150,000 in debt, he picked himself up and started the 21st Century Education Company. Within years, he was a millionaire author and motivational speaker. These days, there are several 21st Century companies and more recently have an online news feed. Then goes back over everything that they've already said. Party believes the current political climate is ripe for the picking, as Gillard, a Prime Minister that didn't get voted in, has left the public disillusioned and hugely unpopular, as is the opposition leader Tony Abbott. He wants to spark political change on a grand scale, abolishing the old, said all that. New technology that he claims is coming out of America and can work. He has a major issue with the current system allowing politicians such freedom with spending the country's money. Well, like that's what they're elected for. The current system is heavily outdated and the government has no fiscal responsibility, McIntyre said. Well, actually, it's all very heavily regulated, Jamie. I would also install an before that he says, we are dealing with a corrupt union-led government that has stolen our democracy. Well, no. I would also install an independent board that would oversee spending. The best business and economic minds in the country would be in charge of the most important spending decisions to oversee and protect taxpayers' money. So what that means is he wants a committee of his mates. People that he knows in business, who he thinks he can make money with, he thinks they should spend the country's money, and it shouldn't be up to the elected representatives, and we shouldn't have any state government, and people shouldn't be made to vote, otherwise they might think about it all. Ah, dear, oh dear, oh dear. The politicians don't have the skill set to manage this amount of money, and it is critical to the future of this country. The party believes the New England area is a very important seat. Blah, 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 blah. Mr McIntyre still holds land in the area, and most of his family live here, even though he now resides on the Sunshine Coast. Mr McIntyre, being an educator, well, that means he set up a mail-order diploma mill on the internet, and people send him money and he sends them a course, and he believes that they've read it and tested themselves, and they believe that the bit of paper he sends them as a diploma means something. A mail-order diploma mill on the internet. Mr McIntyre, being an educator who failed first-year university in accountancy, believes education is of the uppermost importance and plans on overhauling the education system as well, saying the education and awareness can solve many of the problems faced by Australians today. He also said that marketing and innovation is generally the solution to all problems, and if he led a government, that's how issues would be tackled. Marketing and innovation. Right, incentivation. Let's invent words. Mr McIntyre was a bit short on details when it came to tackling important issues facing the New England at the present, although he is releasing a 24-point plan in the next few days to accompany his public meetings. The 21st Century Party's main goal is awareness, and we'll give the public a legitimate third-party choice, Mr McIntyre said. The public meeting was held last night at the Glen Innes District Services Club. Reported April 25th. We're at his meeting in front of a crowd of 50 potential voters. That's out of his 1 million followers, eh? May 28. Here he is outside his shop front that's often closed and locked up with a big flat screen TV in that window there, and other times it has a painted secretary with lots of eye makeup, or sometimes a fellow who used to be the sports reporter at the local paper, sitting there head down on a laptop, working hard all day. he has offices in other towns too. 2nd of July, and then there were two, where he's boasting and gloating about how now that Tony Wins is retired for ill health, therefore he's going to pick up lots and lots and lots of votes, so he says. July 18, we have the Fairfax Metro Media article reprinted in the Examiner explaining the 97.5% bullshit content of what he says he's got as a Twitter following. July 18, call to end supermarket duopoly. Government regulators should step in and force Coles and Woolworths to sell off their market share to other competitors and end the duopoly in the supermarket industry and restore consumer choice, according to Jamie McIntyre. Quote, "In America no such duopolies would be allowed," Mr McIntyre said. So he's never heard of Walmart. However, in Australia, where are the regulators when it comes to things they actually should be doing? In a free market economy, there generally should be as little government intervention as possible unless the market is failing to maintain competition, according to Mr McIntyre. It's blatantly obvious that Coles and Woolworths have been abusing their powerful market positions for a while now, yet why have the ACCCC, the Australian Competitor and Consumer Commission, and the current government failed to deliver for the consumers, Mr McIntyre said. This will not only benefit consumers but also the food producers, like he sells cows and sheep, like 6 farms, who are continually being dictated and squeezed by this large duopoly, with many being sent to the wall. If Coles and Woolworths don't like such a move, they should start adjusting their strategy to ensure they cease their market control and dominance or face the inevitable. Why isn't there more debate on this by the other two parties? Well, it's because we don't live in a fascist dictatorship, Jamie. July 23, we see that apparently a whole bunch of people have been getting on their computers, sort of like the people who sit in your shops that are empty all day, and somebody on their computers has been telling the Examiner that there's nearly 40% of people want to vote for Jamie McIntyre, whereas only 25% want to vote for Barnaby Joyce. Well, I guess 24 hours later, by the close of poll, he's claiming 50% of the vote. But then on August the 6th, the wheels kind of fell off. With less than 5 weeks until the poll, Jamie McIntyre's 21st Century Australia Party has insufficient time to complete the Electoral Commission registration process, forcing Mr McIntyre to run as an independent against the Nationals' Barnaby Joyce. Mr McIntyre has, however, said that he is launching legal action against the Australian Electoral Commission and Prime Minister Rudd over the issue. So from 150 candidates in the House of Reps plus Senate candidates, he's now back down to 1 himself. At the same time he says he's suing the Prime Minister, Jamie McIntyre is challenging Prime Minister Kevin Rudd and Opposition Leader Tony Abbott to a debate on the economic future of Australia. And, like as at August 8, the Prime Minister and Leader of the Majesty's Loyal Opposition were taking no notice at all whatsoever of him. So I went into his office and introduced myself as a local loudmouth screaming greenie and asked what his environmental policy was. And Sonia, the painted secretary with the eye makeup, went through this like it was the first time she'd ever seen it, and she couldn't find any environmental policy anywhere in there at all. But while she was looking at it, I was actually looking at it myself. So I think I was probably supposed to look at the eye makeup, but anyway, I did notice the review of the carbon tax. He basically doesn't think that's a good idea because it's bad for his idea of busyness. And this is a democracy, and we live in a free will universe, and if he wants to exercise his free will to lose his money on a hopeless political campaign to try and pervert the democracy that allows him to stand, I'm not going to stand in his way. So when he asked me to sign a petition to be one of the 100 people who said, yeah, let him have a go, good luck to him, that's what I did. Good luck to him. I hope he loses heaps and heaps of money as he loses the campaign, because he hasn't got a chance, and I'd really hate to see him get elected. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Tony Abbott, Jamie McIntyre, and the fake Twitter followings. Ciao.